So we have build form. So let's take a look at what build form does. We'll scroll up, and it's at the very top here, build form, and then it has the elements passed to it. Now this function is set up to deal with multiple forms on a page, so it has to set up a unique identifier for each form. Now just in case you're thinking about using this code or this approach on your own projects, this is only partially complete. This is not a full solution for processing forms, but you'll get a sense of where we kind of left off as we go through this. So in order to support the different forms, we have a form number, and we need to retain the value of that number between calls to this form. Now in this code, we're only calling it once, so it's not a big deal. But if we generated 2 forms on this page, we would need to persist the unique identifier between different calls to build form, and we can do that with the static keyword. Just like in our build page function, we're setting the output variable to empty to initialize it. Next, we set a number for a form number. If this variable doesn't exist, we want to set it to 1. If it does, we're going to add 1 to it. Next, before we build the form, we're going to check to see if the form has been submitted. So first we check to see if an action variable has been submitted. Now down here, when we build the form, you see we have a hidden input called action, and the value is submit underscore, and then the form number. So it's checking to see if the action input here is submit underscore form number. So the first time this function runs, that form number is going to be the number 1. And so it's seeing if there's a post action called submit underscore 1, which there isn't this first time around. So we'll skip this code and come back to it in just a moment. Next, we're going to loop through each of the form elements and pull out the key as the name, and then the additional values as the settings. We're going to build a label, and we're building it first because some of our inputs don't want a label, like a submit input, and we're grabbing the title from the settings. So if we scroll down and look at our array for the form, this first time around, it will have a name of name, and then the label will have the title, which is name with a capital N. So let's scroll back up to the function, and next we're going to switch based on type. And if we scroll down to take a look at our array, the type for this one is text. So let's scroll up, and you can see we switch based on the type. So we check for text area, it's not a text area. We check for submit, it's not that. And so we're going to run the default, which is generating a custom input type. So input type equals, and then it will be text in this case, because that's what we're passing to it. And then we're setting the name, which in this case is name, and that's going to be our input. Finally, we generate the output, which is going to be the label, plus a paragraph around the input. So far in the processing, we have one input with a type of text and a name of name, and a label with name as well. So the next time we go through this, if we look down at our array for the form, we're going to generate email. Now this has a type of email. If we scroll up, you see as we go through this switch statement that there's not an email item. So instead, we're going to generate the custom input type, which is going to be input type equals email, and then the name is going to be email. We'll add that to the output. And if we scroll down, again, we're going to have comment, which is type text area. And so let's scroll up. This time, as we loop through here, we're going to run this code, which will generate a text area, which has a different format than most of the other inputs do. And it sets the name here, and then adds a closing text area tag. So that will get added to the output. And if we scroll down, we have one more item, which is the submit. And it's got a type of submit. So we'll scroll up. Now, as we loop through this one more time, we're going to hit the submit case here. We're going to generate the input, which will be a submit button, and then we're setting the label to empty because we don't want a label on our submit button. And then finally, we'll add that to the output. So at this point, we've generated all of the inputs for our form, but not the wrapper around the entire form. So that's what we do next. Let me scroll down a little bit. So here, what we do is take the output and we add that hidden input that gives it a unique identifier so that we know when we're processing this particular form. And then we wrap a form tag around it. We set its action to the current page so it gets submitted to itself, and we set the method to post. And finally, we return all of this. So if you remember, this build form function got called from our build page function. So if we scroll down to build page, we'll see right here where we were. So it was building the form. So now that the HTML form is totally built, we're going to add that to the output. And that's the end of this loop. If we scroll down and take a look at our page elements array, you see we had the header that got generated, and we had the contact form, and that got generated too. Let's scroll back up to build page. And now that this loop is done, we're going to return the output. So that takes us back to the very bottom of this code where we ran the build page function. So all of the HTML for the header and for the form now is inside of this page content variable. The last thing we're going to do is run theme page, and we're going to pass it that HTML and pass it a title as well. So let's take a look at what theme page does. Go up here. So we have theme page, and it takes the output and the title. And all this is doing is adding some boilerplate HTML around the output, so it's inside of a body tag, and it adds the title to the title tag in the head element, and then wraps HTML tags around all of that. And that's exactly what gets displayed or printed on the page.